You're tuned in to the Leadership Signal. Hello there. Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Signal, the podcast for voice actors, creative professionals, and smallish businesses. I'm your host, Rob Sogomonian. Today, in our second episode, I wanted to talk about something I don't usually like to talk about, and that is myself. I want to dive deep into my leadership journey from a young boy around the age of 14 all the way to now, after having accumulated 43 total years of life experience. It's probably worth noting that even after hitting that age in May of this year, I still consider myself a student of leadership and not an expert by any means. Experienced, absolutely. Approached by colleagues for advice on how to approach certain situations, certainly. Um, and I do consider myself a professional who has a wealth of experience and knowledge when it comes to leadership and entrepreneurship, absolutely. I also think that leadership is a topic that is one of perpetual growth and development. Leadership is absolutely a journey and not a destination. You're never going to be the leader. You're never going to become an expert in leadership. You're going to get good. You're probably going to get to the point where you're fairly comfortable with making leadership decisions and moving things forward. However, there's almost always going to be something new to learn. Even the most experienced leaders, people who I hold in high regard, like Jocko Willink, Simon Sinek, John Maxwell, Gary Keller, all of them still make mistakes, despite being considered experts in their field by their peers. And of course, I still make plenty of mistakes myself, as we're going to soon find out. But that being said, mistakes and failures are part of being a leader. The key to being a good leader is being able and humble enough to accept those mistakes as they come, learn from them, or ask questions of somebody who might have experience with that kind of a situation and learn from their advice, adjust your course, and continue to grow and move forward. You kind of have to be learning based and growth minded to be a good leader, in my opinion. There's almost always something new to consider. You probably have your experience, you have an idea of how to approach a certain scenario, a certain situation, and yet it might not be the best solution. So we're going to get into this later in further episodes of the podcast, but never be afraid to take a step back and almost debrief what happened. Hey, I just had this problem come up. I had to approach it a certain way. Great, we approached it. We came up with a solution. We resolved the issue, or we, made a step in the right direction towards our next goal. Let's say maybe it's not even an issue. It's hey, I'm here in my career. I want to be there. Let's make a move to kind of get there, and then come back and look at it. Was it the best move? Was there something else in hindsight? You know what they say about hindsight? It's often 20/20 because you have a little bit more context. Was it the best move? Was there anything else we could have done differently that might have been a better choice? It happens. With all that being said, and I do have notes up on my screen because this is going to be a longer episode, and I want to try and hit the high points. I'm not going to be reading necessarily. I have a bunch of little tick marks as an outline, so I'm probably going to be diving into a lot of these things a little bit more deeply. But I wanted to hit some of the major points as I kind of go through my leadership journey, just to make sure I don't bounce around, because especially with the way my brain works, I'll think of something back in the beginning, and then that'll make me think of something closer to now. And then when I'm explaining something closer to now, that'll remind me of something kind of in the middle. And so I'll jump back, and then I'll jump back further because that reminded me of another thing. So I just wanted to get rid of all of that jumping around and put together kind of a timeline and do my best to get through it sequentially. We'll see how I do. With all that being said, let's dive into my leadership journey, and let's start from the beginning. Or maybe a little bit before the beginning. Because my leadership journey actually starts with my dad, many years before I was born. So my dad, his name was Jack Sogomonian. He passed away about 3.5 years ago. Very suddenly, unexpected. Was very sad. Not kind of a sad thing. It was a sad thing. But he was really kind of I'm going to say, catalyst for my leadership journey. And I didn't realize it was leadership at the time. So when I say he was the catalyst, it's not like I was at the time, when I was a little kid being like, "Oh, this is great leadership training. Thanks, Dad." No, it was quite the opposite. How we have our relationships with our parents, and I mentioned in a previous episode, the kind of introduction to the podcast episode, your parents are middle management, right? Um, well, my dad was executive management, and from my perspective, not the type of executive management that was conducive to a well-oiled machine, but it ended up helping in the end, and it was excellent. Like, looking back on it, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. But at the time, you're a 14-year-old kid, you're going through some stuff, and you're angsty. It is what it is. He was originally not from the United States. He's from Kesab, a small little kind of coastal town, from what I understand, near Syria, near the border of Turkey as well. So he grew up in that area. He's Armenian. He's from Armenia, born in Lebanon, grew up in Switzerland, Lebanon, Syria, and Kesab. And so those were kind of the areas that he grew up. When he was 16, he decided that he wanted to be John Wayne, and he moved over to the United States. His brother, my uncle, actually moved over first. He's about, I think, 10 or 11 years older than my dad. And so he had already been out in California for a bit. My dad came out and didn't live with them, I don't think, based on what I've been told or what he was telling me. He moved out. He kind of went on his own, worked a bunch of odd jobs, got into college, started going to college. According to him, he went to UCLA. And then I've got some other various stories of things that he invented, which may or may not be true. I'm not one to judge. However, the stories were inspiring for sure. He saw a problem that needed a solution. He came up with a solution, and he, made a little bit of success while doing it and helping people out while he was going. He eventually got into construction and doing inspections. So he did a little bit of general contracting, probably early on in general contracting in California, so probably easier to get into than it is now. And then he really got into inspections. He started working for a company, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was called Paramount Termite Company, and they were in Los Angeles. So he was doing termite stuff in Los Angeles, working for them, eventually moved up to the Bay Area. My uncle, I think, was living in Berkeley at the time, and so he moved up to be near his brother, and he started his company, his own termite company. I think he worked for Paramount a little bit up here before deciding, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. Left Paramount and started Ararat Exterminators. Now, for those of you who don't know Armenian history or Armenian geography, and I'm no expert either, I've never been to Armenia. I would love to go back and visit. I would have loved to have gone back and visited with my dad. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But there are two mountains in Armenia, Mount Ararat, and then a smaller, like, mini Ararat right next to it. Now, the interesting thing about that, and the reason that I bring it up, is he named his company Ararat Exterminators. I live in the San Francisco East Bay Area, so Walnut Creek, Concord, Danville, Alamo. That's kind of like the area where I live. There is a Mount Diablo here, and there is like a little smaller Mount Diablo right next to it. And I don't know if it even has a name. It probably does. I'm not that interested in geography to have ever looked it up. But there's like there's like a bigger one and a small littler one. And if you look at it and you go and look at a photo of Mount Ararat, it's very similar. It's kind of striking how interesting it is that he decided to kind of set down roots in an area that probably reminded him of home. Spoke fluent English, had no accent at all. No, I'm kidding. He had a pretty thick accent, but totally understandable. He taught me from a young age that, again, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, anything is possible as long as you focus and work directly towards your goals. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And I was one of those kids who, and I still kind of am, have a lot of interests. So for me, I wasn't able to just pick one thing and go. I don't have ADHD or ADD or any of that stuff. I just like doing a lot of different things. I like to keep myself engaged. I like to be interested in stuff. I like to learn. Like, that's kind of who I am as a person. I love learning and I love empowering other people. I've never really had a problem pursuing any of my goals. and succeeding at multiple things. Um, and so for me, if a lot of people that I know, they want to go and do one thing or they want to go and do two things, and it's hard for them to even make that first step. And so for me, I really like empowering people to believe in themselves enough to be able to do that. So that's kind of we're going to get into our big whys in a future episode, but that's kind of my big why is empowering others. Um, as I mentioned, my dad unfortunately passed away very unexpectedly about 3.5 years ago in March of 2022, if I'm doing my math right. And yeah, so I lost a pretty big influence in my life as far as leadership is concerned, and lost a really good friend in the process as well. My journey after he had already established Ararat exterminators, I had been born. I was probably, I'm going to say, and it gets really hazy because again, I said I'm 43 years old now. I was probably somewhere between like 10 to 14. I'm just going to say 14. Um, when I started going to the office with my dad and my mom, we would go to the office. I would basically find things to do around the office just to keep myself busy, using my imagination to make staplers, be jaws and go and eat staples and stuff like that. But I also really kind of started doing some of the office work, just kind of learning how to use some of the new technology of the time, fax machines and copiers. And when I was at the office, I would do paperwork filing. So I really kind of learned how to do, getting my alphabetical things in order. How do you alphabetize a filing system? How do you make it more efficient if you can? Um, Mailing reports out to clients. We had to file reports with the Structural Pest Control Board for the termite company, the termite inspections. We also did chemical applications to treat for termites. So you have to send that over to it wasn't the board, it was like a sub department of the board that you would file your chemical usage reports to. And you'd have to put a little sticker on the top of the report to certify that this is what you did for the month and then send it. Actually, I think it was on the report. You put it on the work order to say, yep, we used chemical on this, and you would send it over. And so it was kind of learning how to do that stuff, a lot of kind of clerical administrative work, but it helped out at the office. Making copies using the copy machine. We had one of those like big old, 6 foot tall copiers, and I'm not tall to begin with. I'm like 5'5" right now. I think back then I was probably 4 foot something. So it was like, oh, okay, trying to get it up on the glass and making it work. But I was also watching my dad and my mom run the company. So I was watching them interact with employees. I was watching them deal with issues as they came up. I was watching them handle challenges and kind of move forward. So it was almost a masterclass in leadership. But again, I'm 14. I'm not looking at it through that lens. I'm just like, why am I working? Like, this sucks. I want to go out and play. But it was a lesson in leadership, right? You got to handle the things that you need to do before you go on and do the fun stuff. We're going to get into the business side of what that means, again, in a future episode, I'm sure. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but I was taking my first steps into what would essentially become a lifetime of kind of being the leader and leadership, building leadership skills. Eventually, in that context, and this is going to be kind of the only time I think that I'm going to like do a fast forward a little bit. I kind of grew up in the industry. I grew up in the real estate industry doing inspections. In California, termite inspections, home inspections, and of course the repairs that are needed to get a house ready for market. All of that is part of a real estate transaction. So house goes up for sale. The sellers sometimes get an inspection to see what might be wrong with the house. Home inspectors. My dad was a home inspector. I never got into that, but general contractors generally are set up to be home inspectors because they kind of know code. They're going to go through and do a property inspection. They're going to see what is to code, what's not to code, what's a safety issue, and they're going to put that together in a very detailed report about what you might need to update in the house or be aware of at least. Buyers never read those reports, but we put them together for the buyers just to make sure. And as a real estate agent, the agents are supposed to read those reports too. Yes, they totally always read the reports. Termite reports are a little bit more focused on active damage. So we would go. So in working with my dad and going out on inspections with him eventually when I got a little bit older, I started kind of working in the business. And when you're going to be a termite inspector or when you're going to go and run a termite company, you have to kind of start from the bottom, as everybody does, and you start as an applicator. So the chemical treat guys. So when you have a termite issue or even an ant issue and you call a pest control company, there's always the guy who's got the hose with the sprayer, the spray nozzle, or the rod that you stick in the ground, or drilling through a concrete slab to get the chemical under the slab. You have to learn how to do all of that, and then you have to go to the state and take an exam to become a licensed applicator. So I went through the whole process. I got my applicator's license, and then I believe, and I might have my timelines mixed up. So if you're a current termite professional and I'm getting these backwards or wrong, please let me know. But I believe at the time, and this would have been early 90s, mid 90s, sometime in the 90s, you got your applicator's license, and then you had to be an applicator for 4 years before you could get your inspector's license. So I did chemical treats for 4 years working for my dad, and I turned 16. I got my driver's license. I was able to drive the work truck. I was able to drive around and do chemical applications. So I got my applicator's license. I did chemical treats for 4 years, and also while I was doing the chemical treats, on days when we didn't have anything, I'd tag along with my dad and go on inspections with him and watch him inspect and kind of see what was going on. And there is a course you have to take. You have to take an education module set of courses in order to get your inspector's license. So went through all of that. 4 years into it, got my inspector's license, and again, you go to the state capitol. You sit at the structural pest control board. They make it very scary, especially as 20-year-old kid as you're going in to get your inspector's license, and got my inspector's license. And then you have to inspect for 2 years, and then you can go and get your operator's license. Now, operator's license for branch 3 wood destroying organisms is the highest license you can get, and it allows you to start, run, operate a termite company. So you can do termite inspections. You can inspect and issue reports, make recommendations for repairs and remediation, and you can do everything all the way down the chain. So you can do the business side of stuff, running the business. You can do the inspection side of stuff, performing the inspections, and then issuing the reports and making sure the work gets done. And you can also do the application. So your license is, transferable backwards and forwards. So I got licensed all the way through doing termite work, basically being able to run a termite company. Here I'm going to bounce backwards just for a second because I just remembered something. I want to highlight that when my dad got his operator's license, and actually I guess this is a good time to bring it up because now you know what an operator's license is. When my dad got his operator's license and he registered his company, the state always gives you a registration number for your company, for your operator's license or whatever. His registration number was Principal Registration PR 76. So he was the 76th termite company that was licensed in California, and he ran that company for 49 years before he finally retired, which hats off to him. Talk about consistency. And he was excellent at what he did. And even now, we're going to get to this. Currently, I work in real estate as well as doing voice acting. Everybody in the real estate community, the vast majority of people who have been in the industry for a long time know who he was and know Error at Exterminators, which is awesome. I love it. It's a relationship business, just like voice acting. In any case, Principal Registration 76. And I think if I remember correctly, his inspector's license number was 5,000 something. So he was like the 5,000th inspector to be licensed in the state of California, which, if you think about it, that's pretty early on, considering mine was 40,000th. when I got my inspector's license, I was 40,000. What was it? 403 E020, I think. I'd have to go look it up. I still have my license. I just didn't think to bring it into the booth with me. I still have my dad's stuff too, so I could go and double check his as well. I think his was 5083, but I'll it's not important. He was in the 5,000s. I was in the 40,000s. So he got he got licensed way before I did. But in any case, I continued to work with my dad off and on until I was in my mid 30s. I would go off and do other things, and then come back because inspections and general contracting, I enjoyed the work, but I never felt like it was my thing, if that makes sense. Like it was fun to do it, but it was never the priority. I was interested in my passion has always been software. I was a computer nerd in high school, and in elementary school and in middle school. I loved computers. I loved video games. I loved programming. That was my jam. So what I did was I would always try to kind of branch off into software, and then something would happen at dad's company, and I'd have to come back because family run business. But that again is leadership, right? Like this is going, I'm going to be fine because this is what I do and I love it. But dad needs help, so I'm going to come back and help him because I can, right? I'm one of the few people that he can trust. I'm going to come back and take care of whatever needs to get done over here, and then I'll go right back into doing what I want to do. So I started programming in middle school, and you guys are all going to be like, well, what does this have to do with voice acting, Rob? And that's the point. All of this does have to do with voice acting because this is my experience. This is what I bring to the table when I do technical narration or medical narration. My aunt, my ex wife, they're both medical professionals. So I know how to say all of those names very smoothly because I've listened to them all of my life. The technology stuff. I know how to say tech words. I know how to go through. Anyway, we'll get on. We'll get to the voice acting again. I told you I'd bounce around if I didn't have a path. So let me follow the path. So I started programming in middle school. Before middle school, in elementary school, I was in all of the school plays because that's what they did with you when you were in elementary school. You got to participate. I loved it. I loved being in plays. I loved doing the talent shows. When I was super young, my parents put me in piano lessons. I still have the piano. It's on the other side of this wall over here. I still play it occasionally. I never learned the theory, so I wouldn't consider myself good at playing piano, but I am good at the songs I can play, if that makes sense. I can learn a song and I'll memorize it and I know what to play, and then I can play the song and I can play and sing at the same time. So I can do all of that stuff. And that's what I love doing at the talent shows. I would get up in front of people. I would, put on a show. I'd be a total ham, and I loved it. It was scary as all heck back then because you're in elementary school and you're doing a talent show and you got the entire school, and in your mind it's the most important thing in the world. Which is it or not? It doesn't really matter, right? But it was, looking back on it, a lot of fun, and it's really what got me into performance. Elementary school, the plays, the talent shows, all of that. And of course, the details are hazy, but I do remember doing all of that. I remember doing, The Entertainer. It's a piano song. It's what the ice cream trucks usually play. Do 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 do. I learned how to play that on piano, and that was one of my talent show songs. And I remember my mom dressed me up in a barber costume. So I had one of those wide brim, like straw hats, with the little band on the top. I was wearing a little like suit, and then I had like the armband around my arm, and I was probably cute as a button. I'm sure I could find photos. I would need to go and dive into our photo albums. But I loved that. I thought it was the coolest thing. And that continued in middle school. I did a bunch of school plays in middle school. I wish I could remember the names of them. There was one where I played Opportunity, and I only knocked once, but I actually knocked 3 times. If you guys remember the name of that play, it's super vague. I just remember that part in one play that I did. Let me know. I can't remember the name of it, but I would love to go and find that play again. But that's also when I started programming, like really programming, was middle school. And my parents had like an IBM, DOS-based computer, and there were a couple of old like bowling games and stuff on them that were just like total gross graphics, but they were fun. And I'd kind of twiddle around in DOS and see if I could figure out what was going on. But I really, really got into BASIC as a programming language when I got to middle school, and so I started learning BASIC. I turned that into C later and Perl when I started getting into web development. Um, that was more in high school. I started building websites, obviously, and actually, I started building websites because, and we're going to get into this in just a second. There was a game that me and my best friend Ryan, Ryan and I, we met in fourth grade. We're still best friends to this day. So do the math on that. Um, we started playing a game called Marathon in middle school, and the Marathon had a level editor, and you can go in and like make your own multiplayer levels or single player levels, and all of the coding behind the way that you would get the story to the players wasn't HTML. I think it was oh, I can't remember. I think it was AppleScript, but it used the same kind of things to change the colors of the text, hex code, if you know what that is, to change text colors, to make things links so that you could like make them look a little bit different or go from one screen to a different screen instead of in sequence. It was awesome, and I loved that aspect. I loved building levels for this marathon game that we had just started. Um, but that's what got me into programming kind of websites. And then once you start doing websites, if you're just doing basic stuff with HTML, which is like the website coding language, eventually you want to do things where people can enter information and have that go into a database so that you can store it and then pull it back when that person comes back, let's say to log into a website again so you can remember who they are. And I needed to learn Perl for that. So I learned Perl. I learned JavaScript, which is not really a language. It kind of is now, but it wasn't back then. More of a scripting tool, but JavaScript, cascading style sheets, like when they first came out back in the day to make websites look nicer, because before then it was all tables. You would just hard code a table and it would basically be this super rigid square design, and it was gross. And then style sheets came out and you could do all kinds of really cool I loved all of that stuff. Um, and the challenge back then was I didn't have any money because I was a student. I was in high school, right? So I dived into learning how to run my own web servers. I built a server at home. I actually, in high school, had a group of all computer programmer type people, and we would play LAN games. We'd have LAN parties before they were like a real thing that people knew what they were. We would troubleshoot all the networking issues. But they were also, a lot of them were into server administration. So I would ask them a bunch of questions. Hey, what do I even need to get a web server going? Oh, you need a computer at home. It doesn't have to be super fast, but it needs to run this and that and the other. And it was like, okay, cool. And then I'd go, and this was before the internet. So you'd have to buy a book to learn how to set up an Apache server so that you could like get your website going. So I learned how to do all of that just to get my websites online. Um, and it was like this the golden age of my life was doing all of this learning just to get a stupid website up on the internet. Um, and I didn't even know what I was doing with the website. Like I literally didn't have a plan for the website. I was just like, this is cool. I'm going to learn it. But eventually that led to other things. And it just kind of goes to show, like, if you're really interested in something and it's just pulling all of your attention all the time, it's probably something you should focus on, because you can take the knowledge that you learn from it and leverage it to do other things. So in high school, I was learning how to run my own servers. I was learning how to we were learning Pascal as a programming language, and then C++ was the AP programming course, which was also a lot of fun to learn. Um, and that's when we really started getting into video games. And again, computer nerd, we all had, hacker names for ourselves. And since I played the game Marathon and I was the only friend in my like little friend hacker group who played this game Marathon, because it was a Mac only game. Macintosh back in the day was not the primary computer. And Marathon was Mac only. All my friends called me Marathon. So, okay, that was fine. As I started getting to the point where I was putting together websites, I wanted a more unique name. I couldn't think of anything unique. I didn't want to be Marathon, because when you get on the internet, I'm sure there are 10,000 people who have the name Marathon. And I'm sure all of you have experience with, hey, I want to use this name on AOL, or I want to use that name on whatever website. And it's taken. So now you get that name plus a bunch of numbers at the end. I didn't want that. I wanted a unique name that nobody was ever going to take. So that's where Cyrix comes from. So if you ever hear me talk about Psyjnir, which you're going to later in this, or if you listen to the intro episode, or if you ever hear me talk about me being Cyrix, that's my internet alias, and you can look me up by that handle, PSYRIXX, and you'll find my personal stuff. That's all of my posts that aren't VO related or leadership signal related. And feel free to follow me there. I don't post anything that I don't mind anybody seeing. So, or I don't post anything that I mind anybody seeing. It's mostly food pics and other fun stuff that I do, aviation, things like that. So the story behind Cyrix is I was playing Mortal Kombat one night, Mortal Kombat 2, I think. And one of the characters in Mortal Kombat is a cybernetic character named Cyrax. And it's Cyrax. And I was like, this is a cool character. I actually enjoyed playing as him. He had a set of skills that I kind of identified with. But I didn't want to just steal his name because, again, I figured a bunch of people were just going to, it's a cool character. Everybody can use his name, right? So I turned the C into a PS. Yeah. So the PSY and then R. And then I changed the A to an I. So Cyrix. But when you do PSYRIX, it doesn't quite look right. Like it looks like it needs a little something extra. So I added an extra X to the end. And so I got Cyrix. And that was probably when I was right around when I was starting to work for my dad. So like somewhere between 14 and 16, probably 16. That would have been what, freshman year? No, that would have been sophomore year. Probably 16. So I was probably 16 when I came up with Cyrix, and that has been my internet handle ever since. And it's very unique. I've never found, well, I think I found one person who was using it on some other site somewhere, but anywhere you look that's important, Twitter or X, whatever the fuck you want to call it, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you look for Cyrix, it's going to be me. It's going to be me. And a fun fact, back in the day when we started playing Marathon, Ryan, my best friend, and I, we would sneak off and figure out how to use the bus system to get to downtown Walnut Creek from Danville, which is not a very long trek, but when you're 14, 15, 16, it seems a lot longer than it actually is. And then we would actually go and spend our afternoons at a little computer store called CompuWare on the corner of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Broadway. Mount Diablo Boulevard in South California, sorry. And we would play Marathon because they had it all. They had all the people who were there played it too, and they networked all the computers so we could play LAN games at this store. Which was that anyway. Childhood memory, loved it. In any case, now you know where my internet name comes from, and now you know a little bit about kind of me getting into computers and what drove me to kind of self-direct myself and self-study to learn how to do website development, server development, and all of that is leadership. All of that is, here's the challenge. How can I find a solution for it? And is it getting me closer to my goal? And at that time, my goal was essentially to start a video game company. I wanted to make games that had compelling stories because that's what Bungie Software was doing. They were Bungie Software at the time, and they renamed themselves later, but we'll get to that. Bungie Software wrote Marathon. They wrote a game called, they developed a game called Myth, The Fallen Lords and Myth 2, and all of their games had rich, story-driven campaigns, and that's what I wanted to do. Their games felt like movies or felt like you were watching a TV show, and it was epic. That is what drove me. Interactive entertainment that is more than just a multiplayer game where you're just shooting people for no reason. These games felt like they had real stakes. There was character development. The character development was not only non-player characters in the world, but also you as the player character. They were developing you through what was going on in the world, which I thought was incredible. I loved that, and I wanted to do that. Um, and at the same time, and yet, I also got into performance in a little bit in middle school and then more in high school. I took drama as an elective all 4 years of my high school tenure, and I absolutely loved being in drama. I thought that that was if I wasn't going to go into video games, I was going to go and be an actor. Um, I was in every school play because that's what you did in drama in high school. And what did I do? We did. So one of the things that I loved doing in drama was improv, and I had an amazing teacher in high school. His name was Mark Cornfield. He's currently a stage actor. He was a principal at a different school. When I left school, he was getting his promotion to be a principal at a school up in Northern California. And one of the biggest influences in my life at that time was him, because he valued not only performance, but also feedback and giving people feedback in a constructive way. Because if you're out doing a performance and you say, "Hey, what did you think? Did you like the performance?" A lot of people can just say, "Yeah, it was good," and that doesn't help the actor at all. So his kind of philosophy was, even if you don't have any constructive criticism to say, try to give positive feedback in a way that is beneficial to the actor. I liked it when you did X. I thought that the way that you approached Y was unique, and I wouldn't have thought to do it that way, but the way you did it worked. Or come up with some constructive criticism where, hey, you know what? When you said this phrase, I think it's supposed to be one phrase and not two, because you know how sometimes when people are reading or they're trying to remember, you have those hiccup moments. So you would give that positive feedback, and then the actor up on stage, you wouldn't try to justify what you did. You would just take the feedback and say thank you. And then if it was relevant, great, take it and apply it. And if it wasn't relevant, great, take it, thank them for their feedback and move on, right? Um, but that's what he wanted to do. And he had this saying, if somebody would be performing and somebody would say, "Yeah, it was good," he would just look at them and say, "You must have been a beautiful baby." The point being, when somebody has a newborn and they say, "Oh, look at my baby," everyone says, "Oh, what a beautiful baby," regardless of whether it is actually a beautiful baby or not. So anyway, he just thought it was the most generic response to, "Oh, look, a new baby," was giving that generic feedback to somebody who had just performed and was asking you for your feedback. So he wouldn't allow that. Basically, if he told you you must have been a beautiful baby, you had to come up with something else that was actually useful to the performer on stage. Um, but in drama, I had two friends, Blake Amon and Tom Nickel, and I'm still friends with them to this day. We put together the performance was um, a Macbeth monologue, and it was is this a dagger I see before me, handle towards my hand? And he wanted it, instead of to be a monologue, the he paired people up, and he wanted it to be a dialogue. So one person would get one piece of it, one person would get the other piece of it. Now, there were an odd number of people in our class, so when he paired everybody off, the three of us, Blake, Tom, and me, were all kind of left over at the end. And what he did was he was like, "All right, you guys are going to get to be a threesome. So you guys are going to do three people doing this monologue." I am so sad that we lost the recording of this. Blake might have it. I'm gonna reach out to him. I know Tom doesn't have it because I asked him about it, like, I don't know, 15 years ago at this point. We put together, and this was right before episode 1 came out. The Star Wars episode 1. This was right before episode 1 came out. I would say 8 months before that came out. It might have been a year before that came out. I don't remember my time. My timing is off because it's been so long. We put together a lightsaber duel on stage where it was two uh, Jedi versus a Sith, which we didn't call it a Sith. It was just a dark Jedi at the time. And it was Blake and Tom versus me. And we turned that monologue into a duel, and we did things that were all in episode 1, and I'm so sad that we don't have our tape because we did force pushing, we did, like, all they were in the books, so we didn't invent it. I'm not gonna say that we invented any of this stuff, but we had all of that stuff going on stage, like, a year before episode 1 came out, and when it came out, I was like, "We did this already." Anyway, um, I loved that aspect of the performance. I loved coming up with a unique story given existing content. It was so much fun. Um, and I'm sure the quality of the acting was terrible because we were in high school and, none of us had really, I think it was our second year. So we would have been sophomores at the time. Um, and I would love to find that recording. Oh my God, if I find it, it's going on anyway, I digress. Let's move on. In high school, a game called Myth: The Fallen Lords came out, and like I said, this was a Bungie game. When Myth came out, we would play. It's a real-time tactical game. So if you ever played a game like Command and Conquer or Warcraft or any of those things, that's real-time strategy. You build a base, you build units, and then you attack your enemies. Real-time tactical, you choose what your forces look like, and then you don't get to build anymore. It's your team versus their team, and it's the same kind of a thing, and it's set in a medieval-ish setting, fantasy medieval setting. Ryan and I loved this game, and we would play all hours of the night. This was back when dial-up was a thing, so I would be tying up our home phone line all the time, getting in trouble because nobody can make phone calls when your modem is on, and but I made some lifelong friends playing Myth: The Fallen Lords, and this is where the Psyjnir complex comes into play. My production company is called Psyjnir Media Studios, and I talk about Psyjnir. I talked about it in the intro episode. I talk about it pretty frequently. The Psyjnir complex was a clan that we formed, just a group of players who all played the same game and kind of wanted to team up, if you will, and participate in things as a group. So we formed this thing called the Psyjnir complex. Now, Psyjnir comes from my handle, Cyrix, which we already talked about. And Ryan's handle was Molnir, and he spelled it wrong. He spelled it Moljnir instead of Mjolnir. And so what we did was we were like, we can't think of a unique name for our clan. Let's just take the first 3 of mine and the last 4 of yours, and we'll call it Psyjnir, and then we'll think of something better in the future. Well, it's been 38 years or however long it's been, and we haven't thought of anything better. So we're still Psyjnir, Psyjnir Media Studios, but it was called the Psyjnir Complex at the time. And Ryan and I wanted to call him Molnir there for a second. Ryan and I were kind of the leaders of the Psyjnir Complex. We were the ones in charge, but it was more of a democracy than anything else. Like I would kind of point people, let's go this direction, and then everyone would all contribute to get there, if that makes sense. I wasn't like strong arming anybody to do anything. But because of that, I got kind of the moniker of the fearless leader. And being little internet nerds at the time, everyone would always misspell and they would spell it TEH. So I was always Tef, fearless leader. But that kind of leadership moniker was given to me very early on and not by me. So looking back on it, there must have been something I was doing that was influencing people to think that I was a leader type person. And it showed. We actually turned the Psyjnir complex into a business-ish kind of a thing. You may remember decades ago at this point, there was a little convention called E3, the Electronic Entertainment Exposition. And when I was 18, I wanted to go to that thing so bad because you could see previews of upcoming games. And Bungie was about to release a game called Halo. And I really wanted to go and play Halo before anybody else could play Halo. And so I turned the Psyjnir complex. Let me take a step back. I turned the clan into a Bungie fan site where I came up with this wild storyline about me and Ryan being kind of the leaders of this organization called the Psyjnir complex, and we were a kind of underground militia fighting for Bungie software. When Bungie was working on the game Halo, Microsoft bought them, and there was a huge debacle because everyone was like, well, they're no longer Bungie, now they're Bungie Studios and blah, blah, blah. But they were still making Halo, but now it was going to be Xbox only. It was going to be Mac and PC, a computer game. And Microsoft was building the Xbox. Bungie was having some issues, and they ended up selling to Microsoft, and then they were going to work on the Microsoft Xbox, the first one that came out. I didn't care. I just wanted to play the game because it was a Bungie game. So anything that they did was fine with me. I came up with this whole storyline where Ryan and I were essentially analogs of the character from Marathon, who is also a cyborg. So we were cyborgs in my little dream world. In my comics, I actually drew web comics at that time. And we were leading our group of friends who were all of the people in our clan. So we had 7 members. 7's a big number in the Bungie mythos. And we were we were 2 of 3 cyborgs that Bungie created to combat androids that they had built many years prior. And I may at some point bring back the comic, and none of this is spoilery territory yet. But I had this whole storyline where when Bungie changed from Bungie Software to Bungie Studios, the androids that they built to do their bidding rebelled because they were no longer Bungie Software. Now they were a different entity. So now they had to the androids that they had built were going to go and destroy them, and so we had to protect them. It was awesome. And I have several comics that I should post somewhere. They're in multiple locations, but I've got an archive of them. In any case, we took that, and in order to get into E3, you have to either prove for free, because again, no money because I'm 18. You have to either prove that you are an industry professional, media, or somebody has to buy you a ticket or like get you in. So for the first 2 years, Bungie Studios, since we had a Bungie fan site, we were kind of on a I don't want to say friend level, but we were acquaintances with a lot of the developers there and the community manager. They would issue us tickets to E3 because they could get guest passes. And so for the first couple of years, we got guest passes. And I went the first year. It was me and my cousin. We went and we kind of scoped it out. I was the only one out of my group. Ryan was also 18, but he was living in Hawaii at the time, so he couldn't make it over. So me and my cousin drove from San Francisco down to Los Angeles for E3, had a ball. And then the next year I was like, oh my God, whoever's 18, you guys got to come to E3 because it was so epic. And it was at the time. Got a couple of more of my friends to come. And again, Bungie was gracious enough to get us signed up for some free passes to go to E3. They loved it. The third year, every one of my friends, I believe, except for one, was 18. And Bungie couldn't they couldn't front that many free tickets. There was, again, like, I think at that time there was 10 or 11 of us who were Psyjnir people. And so we had to come up with a different solution. I made Psyjnir look like an industry organization. One of the people who was hanging out with us was actually getting into game development. So he had 3D models. We had concept art for games that we were actually planning on working on at some point in the future. So we put together a Psyjnir website that was a business website for a game development studio. We applied. We got free passes from E3 for being industry professionals, and all of us were able to go. And we went for 5 years with me planning all of the logistics other than them buying their flights to come in, but like planning when do people arrive? When do I need to be at the airport to pick them up? Where's the hotel? And this was before Google Maps was a thing. So this was me using the Thomas Guide, if you guys remember what that was. It was a map book that was like an inch thick that had all of the street addresses indexed in it, and you could look up where your hotel was and like figure out where the cross street was and then have to like navigate to it. So I was doing all of that planning, navigating. MapQuest was a thing, but MapQuest was terrible at the time. Like the first year my cousin and I went, we had put in the address to the hotel we were staying at, and MapQuest took us into Compton, which, if you're not familiar with California or Southern California or the LA area, that's not necessarily a place you want to find yourself when you're looking to go to a tech convention. So we ended up we couldn't find the hotel, so we ended up finding a different hotel and you know registering there. But that was the contingency plan, right? Like something went a little awry. What do we do? Cool, let's just find someplace else to go. So we did. Um, but for 5 years we went to E3, and for all of those 5 years, I was the one who was coordinating what were we doing when we were in Los Angeles, where were we staying, what was a hotel where we could fit 4 people to a room, because again, poor 18 to 22-year-olds going down to Los Angeles for a trade show. How can we save as much money as possible? And that's what we did. We basically, just overbooked rooms, and it was a great 5 years. I would never change it for anything. It was so amazing, and really, really built again the leadership skills, leadership muscle that I was again not consciously thinking of building. It wasn't something that I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a great leadership skills in the future." It was just it needed to happen. Who's going to do it? No, like I'm the only one who's here. I guess I'm doing it. Let's do it. But that's also the mindset you kind of have to adopt when you're in a leadership position, when you're trying to start your own company, when you're trying to, you know, achieve a goal. How are you going to direct yourself? What is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish, and how do you get there? And it was a great, 5 years of learning how to do that. Um, and again, it just continuously proved the moniker that I had been given early on of to fearless leader. And it actually culminated in, I think, the second to last year that we went. One of my colleagues was shy, not super comfortable with talking to people, even people that they knew, just very reserved. And I'm, I would consider myself. I know nobody's going to believe me. I would still consider myself an introvert. I love being alone. I love kind of working on my own things. I'm comfortable talking to random people. I have no problem with it. I do get drained when I'm in a large group for a long time, and I do like going back to the peace and quiet of a booth or my studio room, and just kind of hanging out and reading a book by myself, right? Like I don't need to be in a group to be having fun. Here I'm talking to a camera and I'm having a ball, reliving some of my past to kind of show leadership growth. Um, I'm sitting in a padded room talking to myself. Yeah, that's great. Anyway, but he was a little bit more reserved, and he was like, how do you do all of this stuff?" And I was like, you just go up and talk to people. Like I don't know how else to explain it. They don't know who you are. You don't know who they are. So if it's a bad conversation, who cares? They're not going to remember you a month from now. Just go do it. And he wasn't buying it. And we were leaving, I think we were leaving an IHOP. I think we had gone to IHOP for lunch or dinner or something. And we were walking down the street. It must have been lunch because it was like middle of the day, if I remember correctly. And there was just a pair of people walking down the street. And I was having this conversation with them. And we were walking the same direction as this pair of people. And they were maybe 10, 15 feet in front of us. And I was talking to my friend and I was like, okay, well, you just talk to them. Like you just talk to people randomly. It doesn't matter if it's a great conversation. Awesome. You made a new friend or a new contact or whatever the case, you got somebody new you can talk to. If it's a terrible conversation and they never want to talk to you again, who cares? It's a little awkward for them. It's a little awkward for you. And then you forget about it a week later, right? Like it's not a big deal. And he's like, that like you don't just go and talk to random people. And I was like, yeah, you do. And he's like, okay, go talk to those two people right in front of us. And I was like, all right. So I jogged up to the people in front of us and we had a conversation the entire rest of the walk, like until they peeled off to go down the street that they were going down to get to wherever they were going. And he was just like, how do you do that? And I was like, you're just talking to people. How'd you talk to me? Right? These are all friends that I met through the internet back before the internet was like this was back when meeting people on the internet was scary because MySpace didn't exist, Facebook didn't exist. You didn't know who you were meeting. I know a name in a video game lobby somewhere. Like, there's leadership for you. meeting random people, flying in from who knows where. Well, I knew where they lived. I knew where they said they lived, to LA to go to a convention with you. That was fun. That was back in the day. Oh man. Um, At our E3 trips, I'm going to get back on topic here. I'm sorry. Uh, at our E3 trips, we were building relationships with Bungie employees. So all of the people at Bungie Software that we already kind of had rapport with, we had relationships with, we were just furthering those relationships. And actually, several. Well, I shouldn't say several. At least one of my friends from Psyjnir got a job in the industry through his not through his connections, but he got advice from Marty O'Donnell, the Bungie music director, and oh God, I can't remember his name. The other guy, the assistant music director, Jay Wineland, which put him into the music industry, and now he's a principal cinematic audio engineer or audio designer at Blizzard Entertainment. So he went down the exact path that he wanted to go down, and I'm going to attribute at least some of that to probably having met Marty O'Donnell, Jay Wineland, I think it was Wineland, at E3, and forming those relationships and getting to talk to them and asking them for their advice on how they got into the industry, and using that to leverage his career so that he could get into. He started in cinematics in, I believe, Washington, D.C. It's his story. I should let him tell it. But eventually his path led him to Blizzard. And that's really what it's all about. Leadership, you know, learning how to talk to people and follow your goals and your dreams. But we would build rapport with the Bungie people. We would build rapport with the community, and we would the last 3 years of E3, we went 5 years. The first 2 was kind of exploring, first me and then a small group of my Psyjnir friends. And then 3, 4, and 5, we hosted movie nights. Like E3 is a great party, but once the convention is over, unless you're going to an after party of some sort, there's really nothing to do. You kind of go back to your hotel, you sit around and veg out, and then you go back to E3 the next day. So we were like, what would be fun? Let's put together a community movie night. And again, that was something that we would all discuss. We would come up with what movie we wanted to see that was coming out around the convention time, and then I would plan all of that, buy tickets. I believe this was before Fandango was a thing, so you actually had to like do some wacky stuff to get tickets ahead of time. So we would get the tickets coordinated. We find out the location. I would book reservations at a restaurant, and we would have people, like everybody who wanted to come to this movie night, not just the Psyjnir people. Like we would invite the community, the Bungie community, to come to these movie nights, and we called them Psyjnir movie soirees. And if you really think about the name, Psyjnir movie soiree, we called it that because the initials were PMS, and we were silly teenagers and thought that was funny to have an event called PMS. Yeah. I would like to think that my humor has grown, but at the time it was funny, when I was an 18-year-old. But regardless of that, the movie nights were epic. Like we had people come from all over the place. Again, randoms from the internet that we had never met in person. Some of them maybe, or we might have had some kind of a relationship with them, but we would just invite the community. Come to this place. We're going to have dinner. Let's do dinner. The movie's right next door. I've got the tickets. This was before Venmo. This was before PayPal was even a thing. Just bring cash, right? Like I've paid for everything. Just reimburse me and I'll give you your ticket. And that's kind of the vibe that we had going in for those last 3 years. And it ended up being the last year, I think we saw Matrix Reloaded. It might have been Star Wars. I don't remember. I know we saw the 3 movies that we saw. I know one of them was Star Wars, one of them was The Matrix Reloaded, or whatever the one that we saw was. We went to Buca de Beppo, and I remember, I think 30 people showed up. It was a huge dinner. Several Bungie employees came who were friends of ours, acquaintances, industry acquaintances, professional relationships. A bunch of people, the artists who drew Mac Hall came, if you remember that webcomic from back in the day. And I was so proud of the fact that I organized this whole thing. And again, I wasn't thinking of it as leadership at the time. I was just thinking it was cool. Like, hey, I just put this thing together and a bunch of people showed up. Yay. I remember getting the bill for that. I remember getting the restaurant bill. And it was the largest bill I had ever seen. Thankfully everybody had I think I was short like $40, which I covered because I just didn't want to deal with it. But it was epic, like putting something like that together, going and seeing a movie and basically taking up like 2 full rows of the movie theater that we were at. Um, so much fun. But that's all leadership. That's all coordination. That's all number 1, number 2, I guess, getting people interested in coming to the event, and then organizing and coordinating everything. It was like those are the memories that make me sit there and go, yeah, like this is why I got in like this is what taught me how to be a leader. And through my relationships that I built, I told you about my friend who works at Blizzard. Um, I eventually started working with Alex Seropian and Doug Zartman and Matt Sell and a lot of the Bungie people who kind of broke off from Bungie after Microsoft bought them. They started a company called Wide Load Games. They made a couple of games, Hail to the Chimp, Stubbs the Zombie. They had a bunch of different games, and I was doing their website development for them, which again was just a lot of fun. And I wasn't, again, not thinking of it as a business. I wasn't thinking of it as leadership. I was just doing freelance website design for Wide Load Games. But when you, again, being older now and looking back at it through the lens of leadership, this was me building relationships with Alex and Matt and all the people at Bungie when they moved from Bungie, keeping in touch with them, and then offering my services when they were looking for development stuff. And I met a bunch of great people working with them. Uh, 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 Phil Schiffman and Aaron Schiffman of Schiffman Creative. They were a boutique design firm that I also did other website development for. This is all building a business, which again, at the time, I wasn't thinking of it that way. I was thinking of it as, oh, here's another cool gig. But it was so much fun, and it's all leadership. Um, and it's also worth mentioning that all of the Psyjnir people, all the Psyjnir crew, we're still friends to this day. The E3 trips turned into yearly vacations, and we basically just kind of went from one person lived to another person lived to another person lived, kind of where everybody lived, and then we started going international. So we've been to Australia, we've been to Germany, or Austria and Germany. We've been to various parts of Canada. Like we've been everywhere, and we go in these large groups. We don't put 8 to a room anymore like we did at E3, but we will do something like rent an Airbnb style thing where you can fit 20 people in a compound or a building or whatever. You're renting this large place, and that way we can stick together. We can have a lot of fun, and these are the longest relationships other than my family that I have. Like we're talking 28 plus years I've known these people, and they are some of my you talk about family that's not family, they are my family that is not family, if that makes sense. But a lot of that is leadership, friends who kind of drift away, and then you reach out and you're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And you kind of bring them back, and then they remember why they wanted to hang out with you. And likewise, I've drifted a little bit away and then been like, "Well, I kind of feel a little bit empty," and then coming back in and being like, "Yep, this is where I belong." Um, it's gonna be a long episode. I'm sorry, but hopefully it's interesting for you guys. Hopefully I'm keeping it entertaining. Um, so during this E3 time, this is kind of the time when I was about to graduate from high school, when I started going to E3, because I was just turning 18. I was getting to the point where it was the year 2000, which is when I graduated. And I really wanted to, at that point, if I was interested in video games, I was interested in building interactive entertainment. But man, if I could have been an actor at that time, I would have loved to do that. I wanted to get an agent out of high school. Um, but again, this was before the internet. So I didn't know how to get an agent. I didn't know anybody who was in entertainment. And it just seemed like such a long shot to be able to, reach out to an agency. I didn't even know what agencies to, reach out to. This was before voiceover. Like I wanted to be an on-camera actor. Actually, Jonathan Taylor Thomas was one of my inspirations because he was a younger kid, had kind of a similar build to me at the time. And I wanted to not be a heartthrob, but I wanted to get into things like, TV shows. Home Improvement would have been fun. any of the Star Wars stuff that was coming out at that time would have been awesome because, again, huge nerd. I would have loved to have been in a Star Wars film. Um, but I just, believe it or not, at the time had zero self-confidence. Even despite putting together these E3 trips, even despite, you know, building my own web servers and hosting my own websites and building all of those, even despite pursuing all of my dreams and like making everything work, having an operator's license or being well on the way to getting an operator's license, starting an online community within an online community in the Psyjnir complex. I had zero self confidence. I did not believe in myself. And I just figured at the time, you know what? If I go for an agent, I'm just going to be wasting my time because nobody's going to want to work with me because what do I have to bring to the table? So I'm just going to go into working with my dad, which I did, and kind of pursuing this other dream of building a video game studio, right? Like that was one of the forks in the road where I could have gone off on this dream of performance. And here's the thing though, I could have done that back then. And yet, I'm actually happier with the path I took because I don't think I would have the same self-confidence. I don't think I would have the same outlook on leadership. I don't think I would have had the same professionalism that I do now, having gone through all of the other stuff, if I had just gone into acting when I was 18. I think that the context that I've learned going through my journey and now coming back to acting as a career or as a focus um, really puts things into perspective. And I think I'm a better person, actor, and businessman for having gone the path that I did. But I do want to say, at the time, graduating high school, I had considered getting into performance. I had considered going and seeing if I could find an acting agent to get into television, movies, and that kind of stuff. I hadn't even thought of voiceover back then. For me, it was acting. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be, like I said, TV, movies, stage, like anything. I just wanted to act. But no self confidence. So I figured it's not for me. It's for other people. I'm gonna go do my thing, what I'm good at, which I'm not a bad actor, but I felt like I had some kind of a skill. I had some self confidence when it came to computers and programming, and I had some self confidence when it came to, termite inspection and the family business. And so that's the direction I went. I just wanted to put that out there because despite your successes, and this is something that I'm sure we're going to talk about in a future podcast, a lot of times, even though you have success, you can still feel like you're failing. And what I like to do personally is at the end of every month or every quarter, and definitely at the end of every year, I look back on the year and I write down every success that I had that I can remember. And I look back and I say, wow, I really did accomplish a lot. Because we kind of tend to forget that stuff, especially when we're in, let's say, a season like the holidays, where maybe in my case, I start feeling kind of lonely around the holidays. I am not very good with personal relationships. I'm great with friendships. I'm great with business relationships. But when it comes to, like a personal relationship, I don't know why. Things just never really click. And so I'm always kind of alone around the holidays. And don't get me wrong, I don't get depressed, but I do get lonely. And so when you're lonely or when you're feeling like you're not having any wins, you can tend to focus on the negative. So I just write down everything that I've accomplished, like 2 weeks before the end of the year. And I can just sit there and look at all of those things that I've done and be like, yep, I am absolutely worth everything that I think I'm worth. And this little bit of, self doubt or lack of I'm feeling the self confidence wane a bit. No, here's the proof, right? Like, here's everything that I did this year. And it's amazing. So it's always good to keep another context on that. Even if it's as simple as, hey, you know what? I put together a couple of demos, or I submitted a couple of auditions, or I finally have a business plan, or, whatever the case may be. They can be small wins, but you put together every win that you have. And when you look back on them, you'll be like, oh, look at everything that I actually did accomplish. So, high school is over. I decided to follow the path of family business and trying to put together a video game studio with my Psyjnir friends, which is not a pipe dream because a lot of us fill the various roles of a video game company. We have the sound engineers, we have the graphic artists, we have the programmers, we have everybody who would make a good leadership team for a video game studio, if that makes sense. And of course, if that's the only people you have, those are the people doing the work too, not just doing the leadership stuff, but they're the ones who are going to be in the weeds. That's what I wanted. I wanted Psyjnir to become a video game studio, and we were going to build games. As I was working on that, I started a YouTube channel when YouTube became a thing, and I put a couple of small videos up here and there. My cousin, who I talked about just previously, he went blind. He had a brain tumor right on where his optic nerves cross, and it put a bunch of pressure, atrophied the nerve, so he lost his vision. And one of his passions was playing video games with me. He loved video games. He loved playing them. It was even better when he was able to play with me and my Psyjnir crew, and he wasn't able to do that anymore. So one of the first big productions that I did for YouTube was I recorded an entire playthrough of Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect, from the beginning to the end, and I would cut out all of the kind of like dead air time when you're traveling or whatever, and I would just post the story bits and then some of the combat to give it a little bit of a feeling of like the story progressing forward. And he loved it. So if you go and look at my YouTube channel, Cyrix, my personal one, you'll find an entire Mass Effect playthrough which I put together for him. And I still, even to this day, take him out to dinner. It was once a week. He's doing kind of a cleanse right now, so he's been a couple of months, but I'm sure we'll start doing it once a week once he's done with that. But I'm available for him because he needs. I enjoy it, and he needs it. So another aspect of leadership, being there for people who need you. And right around that same time, Rock Band came out. You guys remember Rock Band or Guitar Hero? Rock Band came out. I still didn't really have very much self-confidence. Here I am producing videos, working for Wide Load Games, running a termite company with my dad, doing all of this stuff, planning trips to Los Angeles for trade shows and coordinating dinner nights and movie nights. I didn't believe in myself still, despite all of that. And there's much more that it's just not leadership focused, but there's a bunch of stuff that I could go into and make this a 15-hour podcast episode if I wanted to, but we're not going to do that tonight. Rock Band came out, and me and my sister and her best friend would start kind of playing Rock Band. And I would just kind of start on the guitar, whatever. My sister was an excellent drummer, so she was the drummer in our group, and her friend would also do guitar. Well, early on, I started kind of saying, well, maybe I could start doing some of the singing, because I did a lot of singing myself in the shower. Of course, everybody sings in the shower. But I thought that I had a pretty good voice. When I drive in the car, I'd sing along to stuff. I was like, I think I'm pretty okay. When I started singing in Rock Band, they wouldn't let me play anything else. They were like, no, you're the singer. Nobody else wants to sing. You sing because you're good, and you can hit the notes, and everybody else can play all the instruments. And I was totally okay with that. I enjoy singing a lot. I do almost weekly. I did until recently. Would do almost weekly karaoke nights. I'd go out and just on a Wednesday night karaoke at one of the local bars. But that's after Rock Band. But Rock Band built up a lot of the performance confidence in me because again, it's not natural, I don't think, to get up in front of people and perform. And I think all of us has a lot of self-criticism when we start doing that. We're criticizing ourselves way more than anybody else would. And when I was singing in Rock Band, it really built up that, hey, I actually do think I've got a voice and could probably do some singing. Like, I'm doing it and they're enjoying it. And the first couple of times I actually didn't believe them. I was like, really? Like, you guys think I'm good? And then we went out to a karaoke night. This was before, again, I did karaoke nights regularly. We went out to a karaoke night at one of the local country clubs here. My dad was a member, and they had a karaoke night, and I got up and started singing some music, and the old people in the room who have no reason to enjoy my singing enjoyed it. And that was kind of when the performance confidence clicked. And I was like, it's not just my family egging me on and saying, "Yeah, you're great." Now it's random people in a country club applauding me for getting up and singing. So there must be something here. So I kind of started getting more into, I don't want to say the voice acting side of things yet, because I still hadn't really kind of connected that, but getting into being more performative, being um, more of an extrovert, despite all of the previous stuff of not being afraid to talk to random people, but now being able to get up and like give public speeches without feeling self-conscious. Um, and so this is going to lead into one of the things we're about to get to, and that is moving to Georgia. So I mentioned earlier, my ex-wife was a doctor, and so was my aunt. I moved to Georgia with my ex-wife so she could pursue her career. And in Georgia, there is not very much in the way of tech, as like for jobs. You can get a job at, I believe Lockheed Martin was at the Savannah airport. We moved to the Savannah area. Um, Gulfstream might have been there too. Both kind of tech sectors that I wasn't really interested in being in, regardless of them being aviation related. That's a bunch of programming that I just didn't want to do. It's all math. I can do math. It's not my strong suit, but I can do it. Um, so I wanted to do some other things. So I was very interested in aviation back then, and I had just started playing a game called DCS World, Digital Combat Simulator World. And it's a combat flight sim that, here's a shameless ad for them. It's a combat flight sim that has maps that are, various areas around the world, and I think they have something like 50 or 60 different aircraft that you can fly now, like F-15, F-16, FA-18, Su-25, Su-27, all of those aircraft. The base game, when you download it, comes with 2 free aircraft. One of them is an Su-25T. Frogfoot is the name of the plane, the friendly name of the plane. The Su-25T is the technical name of the plane. Well, I love aviation, and I've been flying simulators since, again, I got my first computer that had like actual graphics. Been playing Microsoft Flight Simulator since I was 18, 19 years old, and I knew how to fly planes. So when I would jump into DCS World, I would jump into a plane, take off, fly around, do my combat sim thing, come back, land, and have a ball. I had a couple of other friends who would get in and also be able to fly around and do their thing. And then I had a couple of friends who, getting the aircraft started, because it's a simulator and it does simulate. It's very much not like it's not an arcadey game. You have to flip switches to turn the engines on. You have to make sure the fuel is flowing. You have to make sure the electronics are on the plane. So there's a lot of keyboard commands you have to know to get the plane started. Then you have to know how to taxi to the runway. Then you have to know how to take off and actually, you know, do the keyboard commands to switch into the weapon modes that you need, or the navigation modes to get to where you're going. And I had a couple of friends who, since they didn't play it as frequently as I did, they would come back to it every time and have no idea what was going on. And I would be trying to talk them through things over, like uh, internet voice chat, while the other friends that I have who are flying are coordinating their stuff at the same time. So it was just kind of a cluster. Wasn't a very good way to teach people how to engage with the simulator. So this is where my first, what I'm going to consider my first real VO project came into play. And I recorded a 10-part training series for the Su-25T, one of the free aircraft, so that my friends who weren't aviation inclined could learn how to fly the plane in little small chunks. Like, here's startup and taxiing to the runway. Here's taking off and navigating to your target. Here's switching to the different weapons. Like, here's everything. Here's how to land. And I put together this 10-part series specifically for my friends and uploaded it to YouTube and posted it to Steam, which is a video game platform, a video game purchasing and download platform online, if you don't know what it is. And it was one of the top rated training series at the time. It's got, I think, 5 stars on Steam for the training. I still get comments to this day. This is back in 2008. I think it was 2008. Feel free to go and look up the dates on this. And it was me flying the aircraft, and while I'm flying, I had a mic in front of me and I was just explaining what I was doing. So, kind of voiceover, but kind of not voiceover. The sound quality of the, recording isn't great because we were in an apartment at the time in Georgia. There's definitely reverb and echo. I'm trying to fly the plane while explaining what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So a little bit unstructured, if you will. I did put together kind of scripts like I'm doing for this podcast where I'd have kind of an idea of what I wanted to do and go over. But sometimes I would remember something as I'm in the middle of it and kind of walk people through that. But feel free to go and look up the DCS World Su-25T tutorial on YouTube, and just by Robert Sogomonian, you'll find me. And it's a 10-part series, 11 parts if you count the map editor tutorial that I put together. And that's really the first voiceover job that I did for myself. And it was instructional design. I developed the course. I developed the training. I put together the sequence of instruction. And it's one of the crowning moments in my production career. I had such a blast putting it together. And the best part about it is the friends who were having trouble flying when we were trying to kind of teach them over Mumble. It wasn't Discord at the time, but it's like Discord. It's Mumble or TeamSpeak. I think those were the two that we were kind of cycling through. Because of us kind of talking over each other while we were trying to teach them how to fly, they couldn't get it over that. But when they watched my tutorials, they picked it up instantly. I mean, instantly is being generous, but they were able to do things because they could watch it be done with an explanation. And they got into DCS. We started flying together, and now I had a bigger group of fellow pilots, which was amazing. I loved that. And the fact that I put all of that together, again, what's the challenge? What's the solution? Well, I guess I'm going to build this tutorial series myself. So I did. It took time. I didn't just type it up in one go and do it. I would kind of go episode by episode, put together the training material, write it down, go and kind of practice it, and then I would adjust things as needed, and then record. I'd go through and record. And there were times where I'm doing it live. Remember, this is not me recording the flight part first and then recording the voiceover after. There were times where I would get 3/4 of the way through a series and crash and have to start the whole training series over again because oops, can't fix that in post. But it was a great time. I had a blast putting that together. And that's one of the things that finally kind of clicked the voiceover side of things. I still didn't think of it as voiceover or as a career yet, but when I did finally start going, well, maybe voiceover is a thing that could work for me. That was one of the things where I look back on and I was like, I did that and it was very successful. So this might actually be a good thing. The other side of moving to Georgia, I mentioned that when I got there, there wasn't very many computer jobs, not very many tech related things to do there that get paid for. I decided to go and be a bartender. I'd never worked a service job in a restaurant before. I would consider the termite inspection, the application, and running that termite company is definitely a service job because you're meeting clients at their home and you're telling them everything that's wrong with their home. So you definitely have some difficult conversations with homeowners when you're doing that. But I'd never been in a restaurant business before. And I had watched Gordon Ramsay and a bunch of other like TV chefs and stuff like that, so I was interested in doing it. Um, at the time, I was also just getting into cooking, um, so I was like, "Hey, maybe I can go and do some restaurant stuff. This will be fun." Got my bartender's license in Georgia. You needed it, and then I went and got a job at a place called World of Beer, and they were just starting to open up the location in the city that we were living in Georgia. They were like 2 months out from actually opening. So I went in for the interview. We were in the shell of a building as they're kind of doing construction in the background, meet with the general manager, get hired. Um, and then I started asking like, "Hey, can I help you guys out? Well, I have construction experience. Can I help you guys like do anything?" They were like, "No, no, like the construction company is handling it, but if we think of anything, we'll reach out to you." I was like, "All right, I also have a tech background, so if you have any tech issues, let me know. I can probably come out and help you troubleshoot them." Um, as they were opening up the restaurant, they started calling me and having me, do various admin things for them. And as we kind of got to know each other better, they they kind of had me doing almost like manager level things. So, because we weren't open yet, right? They were still putting the restaurant together. So they would have me run and do deposits for them. Like they would literally just hand me the money bag and I would run and deposit it at the bank and bring back the receipt and all of that, which is stuff that I used to do for my dad. So it was no big deal for me. Um, when they finally opened, and here's the funny thing, I didn't drink beer at the time. I drank wine, I drank spirits, but beer was always one of those things where I was like, man, I'm not really interested. Heineken is gross, and so is Corona. Like I just wasn't. I hadn't been exposed to the right flavors, so I just didn't like beer. They at that time put you through a 2-week beer school, and they taught you every different style of beer, a good majority of the different styles of beer over the 2-week period. And we weren't getting like sloshed or anything like that while we were doing the training, but you would have like a little sip, a half an ounce, just to kind of taste what the beer tasted like. And I found the flavors that worked for me, and I was like, oh, okay, now I can start to get it. When they opened the restaurant, I was working as a bartender for about 2 weeks before they were like, "We trust you. You're smart. You know what you're doing. We want you to be the product manager." And so 2 weeks into a bartending job, I got promoted into a leadership position. And I attribute it mostly to being helpful, but I'm sure that I was also smart and trustworthy and all of that. And when I was working as the product manager, I met one of the most incredible people that I think I've ever met, and he taught me so much about leadership. And this is when it clicked that I was doing leadership. And his name was Jimmy Powell, and he was a great mentor at World of Beer. He taught me a ton of things about customer service and making sure that the customer was always right, but not being a pushover at the same time. How do you approach situations like that where the customer's being irate and or ornery, and you need to diffuse the situation? He taught me all of that. He was a regional director for the World of Beer, organization. And he taught me that. He taught me about how to um be political within an organization without letting the organization take advantage of you. Um which was another set of just huge lessons that I learned from him. And while I was there working as the product manager, they had a system for kind of tracking everything that was coming in as far as product, organizing it, and doing inventory to make sure that things weren't going missing. And it took about 2 days to run this inventory process that they had put together. So for 2 full days, the product managers, the assistant team leaders, and the team leaders were or the assistant managers and the assistant managers were running this inventory process, which means that like things that were happening in the store, if anything was going wrong, nobody was available to help because we were doing inventory. I took this 2-day process and I figured out how to condense it into a 4-hour process. So going from 16 hours to 4 hours. And it was much more accurate than the previous process because we were able to do all of the inventory before the stores really opened and got busy. So we weren't giving product out while also trying to count it. and it was during business hours. We weren't doing any overtime. We weren't doing any like get here at 4 in the morning so we can get started. It was show up at 7 o'clock so we can, get the restaurant open, which the servers and the bar staff would be doing, while the managers and everybody were doing all of the inventory stuff. And we would do the inventory on the things that would move in the mornings first, and then move into the things that would start selling generally later in the day. And the way that I had the process set up, we again took it from 2 full days of inventory to 4 hours. And again, another notch on the belt of leadership. It was incredible, being in an organization where I think they had 30 something locations at that time, and I was the one who brought the efficiency up on the inventory process. And I got a lot of help on it because I was asking the other servers who were in the restaurant, the people who had a lot of experience, kind of being in restaurants. Hey, what about this? Do you think this will work? And they would give me their feedback and I'd adjust. Or, hey, here's how I'm doing it. What do you think? And then they would give me their feedback and I would adjust as necessary. Some of the feedback wasn't great, but a lot of it was. But another crowning achievement on the belt of leadership. Let's see. I think that's all I have to say about that. I was offered an assistant manager position at the Louisville, Kentucky location, but at that point, we were moving back to California. I was not able to accept that position, but that was about a year and a half in to working for World of Beer as their product manager for the Pooler location. So if you go to Pooler, say hi to True West. He's an amazing manager. I'm super happy that he got that role. And if it's past the time that he is the manager there, if you find True West anywhere else, say hi to him for me. So tell him Robert says hi from World of Beer. When we moved back from Georgia, I ended up getting a full-time software engineering position with Lagunitas Brewing Company, of all places. And my experience with World of Beer helped, being a product manager there, giving them my experience and references at World of Beer. It was a huge win, going from being a freelance software developer to being on a software engineering team. And I was one of like 3 developers who were all working on iOS stuff, which I loved working at Lagunitas. It was so much fun. As I mentioned, ex-wife, at the time I started going through a divorce, and I was using. So for those of you who don't know, Lagunitas Brewing Company is about an hour and a half drive from where I live if there's no traffic. The challenge with California is there is almost always traffic. So the drive there was about 2 to 2.5 hours every day in the morning. I would leave here at 4 and 4:30 and get there by 7. And then I would get there super early because nobody else would show up until 9. But if I left it at 8 or 9, I wouldn't be there till like 11. So I left early and got there early. And the drive back was 2.5 to 3 hours. And it's too much to explain, but basically the way there, it's like 4 lanes converging into 1 lane. The way back is like 8 lanes converging into 1 lane. So it's just a cluster unless you leave at like 2 in the afternoon, which I can't leave that early from any job. But I would leave at like 3:30 and get back at like 5 or 6, depending on the day. And that road coming back goes by the Sears Point Raceway, which I don't care what they call it now. It's called Sears Point. Yeah, if there was a race going on that week or that weekend, it would be a 4-hour drive home. It was not fun, but I was going through some things, and so I didn't really notice the drive. I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, and I was loving it. I was listening to how the narrators would perform the roles. I was listening to some narrators doing voices for all of the different characters, some not, and this also really kind of drove me towards the idea of, narration wouldn't be too bad of a job. while I was working at Lagunitas Brewing Company, I was able to pursue my lifelong dream of actually getting my pilot certificate. So I went and got my pilot certificate while I was working there. Um, 2 years into working at Lagunitas, the commute started getting to me. I kind of finally started coming out of my funk from what I was going through. And I started realizing, wow, this is a lot of driving and it's really boring. And I'm not enjoying it at all. Because I was kind of coming back to being myself and I was just like, this is not this is not cool. So I tried to see if there was a way that we could do some kind of a remote work situation, but COVID hadn't happened yet. So that wasn't really a norm and they weren't really interested in doing that. So I decided to part ways with Lagunitas and I kind of looked around to other software engineering companies here, like in San Francisco, in San Jose, and it didn't really matter where I looked. It was still going to be like a minimum 90-minute commute into work and back, taking BART or taking public transit or driving myself. And I just didn't want to commute anymore. Like I was over that much driving. I just didn't want to do it for work. Like why I didn't it just didn't feel like it was a good use of my time. So I decided to step back from doing software engineering. Um, I did a little bit of kind of looking into getting back into the video game scene, and yet at that point, the way that graphics had kind of progressed, the way that the gameplay had kind of progressed, I just didn't feel like there was any way that I could catch up. Like a lot of my friends had already, a lot of my Psyjnir crew had already gone and gotten jobs doing other things. And so it would have been really me putting together a proof of concept myself, which that didn't seem like a good use of my time either. And I didn't have the budget for it. So I stepped away from software engineering and I had a bunch of experience in the real estate market, having done all of the inspection stuff for my dad, having worked directly with realtors and homeowners and all of that. I decided to get my real estate license. And I did very quickly because I had a bunch of experience with it. And then I very quickly, I joined a brokerage. I joined Keller Williams Realty. And I very quickly became one of the trainers in the market center for tech, specifically because I had that background. So I would help agents who were, in a little bit more experienced than me, we'll say in their 50s plus, who weren't super computer savvy. I'd teach them how to use the MLS, which is our multiple listing system to be able to search for homes. It's a very archaic system. It's not very intuitive. It's kind of a pain. But if you know how to look at that kind of a system and navigate it, it's not too bad. So I would teach them kind of how to run that stuff. I would teach them how to even do like some computer stuff. They wouldn't know how to get a PDF signed or, like get the DocuSign stuff to work. So I would kind of help train them through that. In doing that and not looking for any kind of promotion, literally just being available to help other agents get their tech working. The owner of our market center, a lovely young lady by the name of Bev Steiner, noticed, and she was looking to hire a regional director for the Southern California region of Keller Williams, and it was a tech trainer position. So she had the team leader, Margot Poss, reach out to me and basically say, "Hey, we've noticed what you've been doing in the market center in the office, and Bev wants to sit down with you and see if you'd be a good fit for this role that she has down in Southern California." So about a year and a half into my real estate career, I got kind of plucked into in a very good way because that was the year when I got hired to be the regional tech trainer for the Southern California region of Keller Williams the May of the year that COVID started. So I went from having no income because yay COVID to having a salary and teaching people how to do everything over Zoom, which I had never heard of Zoom before, but now Zoom was how we did everything. So I had in addition to doing that, since I had so many contacts and friends and relationships in the real estate community already through working with my dad and running the termite company, I was very involved in the local kind of marketing associations. And if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see every week almost I'll post something about CCRIM, which is Contra Costa Real Estate in Motion, and RMA, which is Realtor Marketing Association. One's in Walnut Creek, one's in Danville, just two kind of separate market segments. And I'm very well known in both of those meetings, both of those groups of realtors. And that year, I had been elected. I ran and was elected to the president-elect position. So my role was basically to shadow the president and see kind of what was going on. Unfortunately, right before COVID happened, um, the sitting president had to step away from the post because there was a family issue. His husband's mom was having some health issues, so they moved back to Texas, and that left me to be the president during COVID, which was a lot of fun. But it was actually really cool because everything that I had started learning through using Zoom for the regional tech trainer position, I was able to leverage and keep the CCRAM meeting together through COVID and keep people engaged. And we still had plenty of people joining. We had guest speakers like we always do. And just navigating that time period was a challenge, but it really solidified for me the value of a leader who doesn't panic, which I tend to be fairly stoic and fairly even keeled. But I was watching some other leaders, not necessarily in the CCRIM organization, but just in leadership in general, people that I knew who were kind of like leaders, go a little batty. And the fact that we were able to not only keep CCRIM going through COVID, but when we came back from COVID, all of the agents who had kind of joined us during COVID just to kind of keep in touch with the market started coming back to our in-person meetings once we opened up and were able to do that again. And we went from like a attendance of about 80 to now we have like 120 people showing up every week in person, which again, it's another notch in the leadership belt of showing how being consistent and moving things forward. And here's the challenge: how do I solve it? Often gets you success and growth. When I was doing the regional tech trainer position for Southern California, I was the person talking to like the top agents in the region. So if they were above a certain level of production, they would talk directly to me on how to use the proprietary system that Keller Williams had developed called Command. Really great system. As long as you use it, whatever system you're using is going to work, right? And a lot of the top producers were using other systems that cost them a ton more money than what Command costs them. And so my job essentially was to offer them an alternative to what they were using that would save them thousands of dollars a month. And I was pretty good at doing that because I'm fairly good at explaining tech. I've been doing it since I was 14, 15, right? And so the other side of my job was the agents who weren't quite at that level or above, they had a local market center tech trainer who would work with them. And I had 21 to 24 market center tech trainers that I was responsible for making sure they knew what was going on, helping them train agents in the market center, popping in to do like office trainings for the market centers for something specific, and really kind of putting my leaders, my trainers up on pedestals to almost build trust, because I trusted all of them. They were all amazing trainers. They all knew exactly what they were doing. They were all very tech-minded and good explainers and great at walking people through things. But a lot of these agents just didn't trust them because they were younger. They were, let's say, 20 to 25 to maybe 30. And these agents generally were in their 40s or like late 30s. And they were like, who's this kid trying to teach me how to use this tech? And I'd show up and I'd be like, "No, no, they know exactly what they're talking about." And I'd be like, "Hey, Sky, tell whoever about whatever." And she would go through her whole her whole curriculum, and the agent would get it, and they'd be like, "Wow, I can't believe I didn't pay attention to this sooner." And I'm like, "Well, I'm just here to tell you that she's worth it." Like, I don't know what I was doing there, but it was also kind of coaching them up to believe in themselves, because I remember what it was like when I was in my 20s and I didn't have any self confidence despite all of my successes. And one of the biggest things that I told them was, these agents are coming to you for a reason. You're the one who knows what this system does. So you are the expert, and they see you as the expert. And so you just have to be the expert, right? If you're feeling a little bit self conscious or you're feeling doubtful of your ability, remember this agent has no idea what they're doing. And you at least have some idea of how this should work, which makes you the expert. So don't let them push. I was basically being a Jimmy Powell to all of the tech trainers that I was, working with. It's like, don't let them boss you around and don't let them be dicks. You're the expert. So if they don't want to value your time, cut them loose. Tell them to reschedule. Tell them to talk to me. I'm happy to put them in line for you. And it was great. It was amazing to watch their growth in leadership as they kind of, a lot of them had the self-confidence already. So I'm not trying to say that I'm the only reason that they had any self-confidence. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But the validation that they got from having permission to do what they needed to do from their regional director trainer, watching them grow and blossom and turn into amazing leaders in their own right was so satisfying. That is, we're going to get into big whys in the next episode, but that was the pinnacle of me empowering others to do what they wanted to do or what they need to do. And that's my big why, is empowering others. And so I so much fulfillment out of that role. Now, during COVID, I also started a cooking live stream. So I mentioned earlier that I watched some cooking shows. I really liked cooking myself, and I had watched a couple of Gordon Ramsay shows from the UK, called Cook Along Live and The F Word, and they were so different than things like Hell's Kitchen or the American versions of his shows. They were so much better. And Cook Along Live in particular, I think it was only one season, but it was Gordon cooking with a celebrity something. They were doing like Steak Diane or tiramisu or something, and it was live in the UK, and they would just be like cooking together on the show. When COVID hit, I wasn't going to be inviting people into my house to cook with me, at least not at the beginning, because we didn't know what was going on. But one of the things that I had been doing for probably a decade prior, my sister and that same friend that I mentioned earlier who would come over to play Rock Band with us, her name is Hannah. Every Tuesday night, Hell's Kitchen would be on, so we would be watching Hell's Kitchen, and American Idol was on, so we'd be watching American Idol. Unfortunately, American Idol was on before Hell's Kitchen, so I'd have to sit through that to get to Hell's Kitchen. But Gordon Ramsay's the one who kind of inspired me to start cooking. And if you go and look at Cook Along Live, I've gotten to the point where I feel like I'm a pretty good chef. I can make quite a bit of food, and I make pretty good food. Every Tuesday, we would do Taco Tuesday, so we would do taco night. And we would do, fajitas or fish tacos or some kind of Taco Tuesday night, fresh guacamole, fresh pico de gallo or salsa, whatever you want to call it. And that was kind of a staple in our household. When COVID hit and we weren't able to go out and do anything, the first Cook Along Live episode was me making tacos and basically inviting everybody that was in my friends list on Facebook and saying like, hey, we don't know what's going on. It's scary out there. Buy a bunch of ingredients, come and join me on my live stream, and we're going to cook tacos and have a Taco Tuesday. And that turned into Taco Tuesday, and then fresh pasta, and then eventually Ratatouille, the Disney style Ratatouille, and then Chipino, and then like 73 episodes later, and we finally come out of shelter at home, and once a week for 73 weeks, Cook Along Live was up on YouTube. And the day shifted around every so often. I think I started on Tuesday, and then I started doing it on the weekends. And then I think I moved it to Thursday, and then I think I went back to the weekends. I don't remember. But every week I cooked something new, just to bring people together and just kind of keep that sense of community and keep people hopefully engaged and in a positive mindset. And I had, people chatting with me, not not vocally, there wasn't any voice coming up, but it was a live presentation acting, basically, like teaching people how to cook. Which don't get me started on how much fun that was, and that is coming back as soon as I start making enough money to bring that back. That's coming back. um Once we started coming out of COVID, I was looking for more growth opportunities, more leadership opportunities, and now I was full on thinking of this as leadership. I had been coaching with, in Keller Williams with all of the top leaders. I had been going to courses on leadership, and I was really, really now thinking about this as I'm a leader. How can I best get to my next objective? And I wanted to grow in the tech space. The challenge was that particular role kind of has a cap. It doesn't really have any vertical mobility. And so I wanted to grow in other ways. So I stepped out of that role, went into a more local leadership position, which I thought the fit was good, but the um, compensation didn't match what I thought it should be. And so eventually I stepped out of that position and moved back into just being a production agent. Um, the challenge with that is I had already kind of started to fall behind the ball financially because of stepping into a role that wasn't compensating me where I needed to be. Um, and so being a production agent, you have to build up a business, and it was in a down market in California. So I didn't really have any business. So I made a couple of other moves, brought back Psyjnir, the Psyjnir complex, but I named it Psyjnir Media Studios. And if you notice, my humor is still a teenager because Psyjnir Media Studios is PMS again. Like I said, I'm leadership is a journey, and I'm by no means an expert. But Psyjnir Media Studios focusing on video production, specifically for realtors. At the time, I mean, everybody says video is king. Let's put together more reels. Let's put together more like home walkthroughs, team introduction videos, things like that. I thought that would be a really big hit. However, in a down market, nobody really wants to invest in that kind of stuff. So that was not really a great pivot. Decided to jump kind of similarly. Earlier, before I decided to step out of that role, I had started kind of working on voice acting as a career. And now I just kind of doubled down on it. And so voice acting became a very big focus of mine because now I actually thought I could do it. I had all of this experience from all of my success, all of my leadership, all of my training people, teaching people, working with people, explaining things to people, live announcing with people, doing the Cook Along Live, being live and in person in a leadership role as the president of CCRM. All of that kind of brought me to the point where, my confidence levels were topped up. And I was like, what is one of the things I've always wanted to do? Act. We're still kind of in a weird situation where acting isn't really like, you need an agent. How do I get an agent? I need some kind of a product. What kind of a product can I do? I can produce voice. So why don't I get into voice acting? And so that's kind of where that came into. As far as a primary occupation, while I build up the voiceover business, which is going very well, by the way, I shifted into property management. And that's my primary occupation right now. That's what I do during my day job. I don't manage the properties. What I do is I use my construction and inspection background to go through all of the units, when somebody moves out, I am a turn coordinator. So we call it a turn when somebody moves out and we're looking to put a new tenant in. So I go through the property and I see what needs to happen to get it ready for the next tenant. Does it need new floors? Does it need new paint? Are there holes in the wall, like big holes that need to be patched? Is there appliances that don't work? And I coordinate all of that with the vendors, get the property market ready again, and then let the property manager know, hey, it's ready. And then they put it back on the market and we can get the next tenant in there. And that's what I do as a primary occupation. It is actually super fulfilling. I do really enjoy it. And so it's a lot of fun. And the team that I work with at Stokely Properties here in Pleasant Hill, California is amazing. I love them all. They're all great. As far as my voiceover side of things, I've been through several VO schools. I started with Bill DeWeese, his voiceover blueprint, learned a lot, and actually was surprised at how similar voiceover is to real estate in the sense that you need to direct market and build a client base and then start working with those clients over and over again. And then a bunch of other stuff. Met a bunch of other wonderful people. I've been through several of the VO schools that are available. And from one of them, actually, several of us, actually 8 of us, kind of banded together and formed our own little troupe. We're called Articulate Studios, and we're working on our own audio drama right now called Static Shift, which is incredible. If you guys, the pilot episode is up on articulate.studio if you want to go listen to it. It's a lot of fun. We've recently re-recorded it, and we're going to be reworking it because we've got some feedback that the intro song and the outro song are a little bit long. So we've kind of tightened those up a bit. We re-recorded some of the boxy dialogue, and we're going to be looking forward to bringing that. But we've got, I think, 8 or 9 episodes recorded and in the processes of being edited. It's a lot of fun. It's a great little series. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. But Articulate Studios is another one where a couple of us from a school kind of grouped together as leaders and we're like, well, the school is fine and we want to do more. What can we do? Let's start our own voiceover troupe and start creating our own content. So more leadership. All of this is leadership. So that's the end of my story. And it's been an hour and 57 minutes. So if you've stuck with me to the end, congratulations. I hope it's been interesting. But I do want to just have a couple of more minutes to talk about the mentors, the great influences, and the advisors that I've had along the way. Because I did not do any of this alone on my own. I had plenty of people that I could talk to and advise me and guide me and help me through issues. And so I just want to give a huge thank you to all of them. And I've got a list here, and I'm going to go through the list, and it's not exhaustive. I would be here for 3 days or longer if I were going to be exhaustive. But my dad, my mom, my stepmom, my stepdad, my sister, my brother-in-law, all of my Psyjnir crew, my Articulate crew, most recently, too many people to list at Keller Williams Realty and eXp Realty and the real estate community here in the East Bay, just in general. But I do want to name some standouts at Keller Williams and eXp and the real estate community. Beverly Steiner, thank you. Margot Paz, Chris Thurston, Zach Younger, Marty Miller, Mike Hillary, Gary Keller, Jason Abrams, Lauren McLean, John Fognazio, Joe Stokely, Michael Moore, Amira Lillipur, Jerry Kidd, Diane Gilfeather. This is just like a tiny, tiny fragment of the people that I can thank. Jim Georgantis is another one. I mean, I could go on for days just naming everybody in the real estate community who has influenced me in some kind of a positive way. And that's also why I love it so much. Like I even if I make voiceover a primary career, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to just step away from the real estate community. There's just too much good stuff here. There's too many good people. Leadership mentors, if we're talking purely leadership, Jocko Willink has been a huge influence in my leadership journey. I started listening to him back at episode 186, like 3 years ago, and he's at 500 and something now. So his stuff has been hugely influential on me. John Maxwell, Simon Sinek, Tony Robbins, Jimmy Powell at World of Beer, and then just a ton more people in leadership in various different roles. As far as voice acting mentors, Bill DeWeese, Mike Hathcote, Anthony Pica, Gabby Nistico, Liz Atherton, J. Michael Collins, JMC himself, Mark Scott, and Paul Schmidt. Excellent mentors, great teachers. Highly recommend. If you haven't worked with them before, give them a call or start working with them. And I also now have a new appreciation for actors when they're trying to get through their acceptance speeches at awards ceremonies. I'm sure I've missed a couple of or several people. And the truth is, almost everybody in my life has affected me in some way. And I've learned something from pretty much everybody that I've ever met. So if you know me and I consider you a friend or family member, please know if I didn't name you in the above lists, I absolutely am appreciative of you, and I extend you my sincere thanks for everything. So the point that I wanted to make with this episode is really that leadership is a journey. Everybody's journey is different. There is no one way or best way to do leadership. You're just going to learn as you go along. Can you read about it or listen to podcasts like this one and get some tips and pointers and maybe not make some mistakes that we make? Yeah, absolutely you can. That being said, you're going to make mistakes. So don't worry about it too much. Hopefully by sharing some of the Cliff's notes of my journey, because there's a bunch more that I left out and it's still a 2-hour episode. Hopefully by, going over some of the Cliff's notes, I've established some form of credibility as someone who can host a leadership podcast and be a positive influence on your leadership journey. I also wanted to try and highlight some things that influenced my journey that might not be obvious as being directly tied to leadership growth. And I'm going to challenge you to think back on your own experiences in your own life. Are there any times that you can think of that might have been leadership moments that didn't seem like they were at the time? Even something as simple as taking a long trip for the first time alone, going to the airport, managing your ticket, do you need a passport, having the right ID? These are all absolutely leadership experiences. And then getting to your destination, and then being able to rent a car and navigate to where you're going, or taking a road trip. You live in Florida and you want to drive up to Virginia. The first time you do that, that's a leadership experience. You're not going to know everything that's going to happen. Maybe you get a flat, maybe you don't, right? Like, it's all leadership. And finally, almost no one succeeds alone. Do not be afraid to ask for help or seek counsel from people that are experts in their fields or in fields that you want to pursue. You heard my list of influential people. I just thanked a bunch of them a moment ago, and I would not be anywhere near where I am in life or business or leadership without their help and counsel. So now thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Leadership Signal. Whether you're at the beginning of your journey or somewhere further along your own path, let this podcast be a beacon that continues to guide you along the way. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on Apple or Spotify and consider subscribing to the podcast in your listening app of choice. If you'd like to submit any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email me at podcast@theleadershipsignal.com. Some questions may be covered on future episodes, and I will reach out to any guest suggestions that you make and see if I can get them on as guests for the podcast. And if I do plan on tackling your question in an episode of the podcast, I will reach out and see if that's something that you would like to keep anonymous, or if you're okay with me using your name in the question as we address that issue.